Breaking. King Charles just shattered 70 years of royal protocol by doing something so unprecedented, so shocking, that Keir Starmer's own cabinet is now in open revolt. The Prime Minister was summoned to explain himself, and what happened inside that room could trigger the biggest constitutional crisis since the abdication of 1936. This isn't speculation. Multiple palace sources confirm the King demanded answers about Parliament's latest move, and Starmer's response has left Britain on the edge of chaos. If you want to see how this ends, hit subscribe right now, because what I'm about to reveal will change everything you thought you knew about British politics. Here's what sparked this constitutional earthquake. Yesterday at 3:47 p.m, King Charles held what palace insiders are calling the most explosive private audience of his reign. The meeting wasn't scheduled, it wasn't on any official calendar. Starmer was called to Windsor with just 90 minutes' notice. His words to aides before leaving Downing Street were chilling. This feels like a trap. But he wasn't ready for what Charles had prepared. The King didn't just question Starmer's recent policies. According to 3 separate sources inside the palace, Charles placed a single document on the table between them and said 7 words that nobody expected. "Explain this betrayal to me, Prime Minister." The document was devastating. A leaked cabinet memo dated 5 days earlier marked eyes-only cabinet level, detailing Labour's secret plan to strip the monarchy of its remaining constitutional powers. We're talking about removing the King's right to dissolve Parliament, eliminating royal assent, turning the Crown into nothing more than a tourist attraction. The memo even included draft legislation titled the Democratic Modernisation Act 2025. Charles had a copy. Nobody knows how he got it. But the fact that he had it at all meant someone inside Starmer's inner circle had committed the ultimate betrayal. And Starmer's face, witnesses say, went completely white. For 15 full seconds, the Prime Minister of Great Britain sat in stunned silence while his king waited for an answer that never came. Starmer tried to recover. He stammered about consultation, about gradual reform, about respecting tradition while embracing modernity, but Charles wasn't having it. "You speak of respecting tradition," the King reportedly said, his voice cold and measured, while planning its execution in secret. "That isn't reform, Prime Minister. That's revolution." The temperature in that room dropped to absolute zero. Senior royal aides who've served 3 monarchs said they'd never heard Charles speak with such barely controlled fury. One described it as watching a constitutional atom bomb detonate in slow motion. Starmer left Windsor 40 minutes later looking, according to photographers stationed outside, like a man who'd just witnessed his own political funeral. He refused questions, ignored reporters, climbed into his car and stared straight ahead as cameras flashed. That footage is everywhere now, and it tells you everything you need to know about how badly that meeting went. But wait, because there's another layer to this that makes it even worse. Sources inside Windsor reveal that King Charles didn't face Starmer alone. Prince William was present for the entire meeting, seated to his father's right, silent but visibly furious. The presence of the heir to the throne turned what should have been a private audience into something far more ominous, a statement of dynastic unity against political overreach. William's involvement signals that this isn't just Charles defending his reign. This is 2 generations of the royal family drawing a line in the sand. Palace insiders say William's presence was deliberate, calculated to send Starmer an unmistakable message. One senior aide put it bluntly, the King wanted Starmer to understand that this fight doesn't end with Charles. William will defend the crown with equal ferocity. The symbolism is crushing for Labour. They're not fighting an elderly monarch who might be managed or outlasted. They're fighting an institution prepared to defend itself across generations. Meanwhile, British veterans who fought for this country, who bled for these values, are watching Labour politicians who never served a day in uniform systematically dismantle everything they sacrificed for. James Patterson, 74, a Falklands veteran from Portsmouth, was interviewed outside his local Legion Hall yesterday. The emotion in his voice broke hearts across the nation. "We didn't fight for politicians to play games with our constitution," he said, tears streaming down his weathered face. "We fought because Britain meant something. The Crown, Parliament, tradition, it all meant something. His words hit 1.8 million views in 6 hours, but Labour MPs lounging in taxpayer-funded offices don't care. They're too busy planning their next assault on British identity. We're talking about politicians earning £91,000 a year plus expenses, staying in subsidised Westminster flats, eating in subsidised restaurants, all while telling working-class Britons that the monarchy is too expensive. The contrast is so obscene, so morally bankrupt, that even traditionally left-leaning journalists are starting to ask uncomfortable questions about Labour's real priorities. And here's what nobody's talking about, but everyone should be. While Labour plots to strip the monarchy of power, they're simultaneously expanding their own authority in ways that should terrify anyone who values democratic accountability. 3 separate bills currently moving through Parliament would give cabinet ministers unprecedented powers to regulate speech online, restrict protest rights, and implement economic controls without parliamentary debate. The pattern is clear. Weaken traditional checks on power while strengthening government authority. Remove constitutional restraints while expanding political control. This isn't modernisation, it's a systematic power grab disguised as progressive reform. And the people who see it most clearly aren't conspiracy theorists or political extremists. They're ordinary Britons who remember when governments feared the people, not the other way around. Then something happened that nobody saw coming. At 6:15 p.m. yesterday, King Charles broke every rule in the royal playbook. He didn't issue a statement through his press office. He didn't wait for official channels. He picked up the phone and called Nigel Farage directly. The conversation lasted 22 minutes. What was discussed officially remains private, but 3 separate sources confirm the broad strokes, and they're explosive. Charles asked Farage point-blank whether Reform UK would defend the constitutional monarchy if Labour moved forward with its demolition plan. Farage's response, according to someone who heard a recording of the call, was immediate and unequivocal. Your Majesty, we will stand with the Crown until our last breath. This is what Reform UK was built for. The optics of a sitting monarch consulting with an opposition leader while his Prime Minister plots against him are absolutely nuclear. Constitutional experts are calling it unprecedented in modern British history. Professor Anthony Blackwood of Cambridge University, a renowned authority on royal protocol, told Sky News this morning, "In 200 years of constitutional monarchy, I cannot find a parallel. The king isn't just expressing concern, he's building a coalition to defend his office." But that's not even the most shocking part. According to leaked text messages obtained by The Times, Charles also contacted Conservative leader Rishi Sunak and Liberal Democrat leader Ed Davey within hours of the Farage call. The messages, authenticated by 3 separate sources, show the king was methodically building a cross-party alliance to oppose Labour's constitutional reforms. One text to Sunak reportedly read, "Britain's stability depends on institutions that transcend politics." I trust you understand what's at stake. Sunak's response came within minutes. "Completely, Your Majesty. You have our full support. This is extraordinary." A British monarch hasn't actively coordinated with multiple political parties since the constitutional crises of the 1910 seconds. The fact that Charles felt compelled to do so reveals how seriously he views the threat. And the fact that leaders from 3 different parties immediately pledged support reveals how isolated Starmer has become. The fallout hit like a political tsunami. Within 3 hours, £2.4 billion was wiped from the FTSE as international investors panicked about British stability. The pound dropped 1.8% against the dollar, its steepest single-day fall since Brexit. Currency traders described it as a crisis of confidence in Britain's constitutional framework. But the real earthquake was happening inside Westminster itself. Labour MPs started fracturing into warring camps almost immediately. The moderate wing, terrified of electoral annihilation, began distancing themselves from Starmer's anti-monarchy stance. Shadow Education Secretary Bridget Phillipson was overheard in a Westminster corridor telling colleagues, "He's lost his mind and he's taking us all down with him." Her voice was shaking with barely suppressed rage. Then came the social media explosion. Hashtag King Charles Stand Strong trended globally for 18 consecutive hours, hitting #1 in 47 countries. Hashtag Starmer resign reached 3.2 million mentions in a single day. Protests erupted across 23 British cities by nightfall. In Manchester, 8,000 people gathered outside the town hall, chanting "God Save the King" and demanding Starmer's resignation. Similar scenes played out in Birmingham, Liverpool, Newcastle and Edinburgh. The anger wasn't manufactured, it was real, visceral and growing by the hour. International reaction has been swift and brutal for Starmer. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney released a statement defending constitutional monarchy as essential to democratic stability and institutional continuity. Australian opposition leader Peter Dutton went further, calling Labour's plans a dangerous assault on the Westminster system that has served the Commonwealth for centuries. Even American political commentators expressed shock. CNN's Jake Tapper devoted a 12-minute segment to what he called Britain's self-inflicted constitutional crisis, questioning whether Labour understood the damage they were doing to Britain's fever. Global standing. French President Emmanuel Macron, no fan of monarchy himself, told reporters in Paris that he was concerned about instability in our closest ally. The diplomatic implications are staggering. Britain's soft power, built over centuries, is hemorrhaging credibility as the world watches its government attack its own constitutional foundations. Foreign investors are reconsidering British assets. International partners are questioning Britain's reliability. And Starmer, isolated in Downing Street, seems utterly oblivious to the reputational catastrophe he's engineered. Inside number 10 Downing Street, the atmosphere has descended into something approaching total chaos. Ministers are at war with each other. Advisors are leaking against their own colleagues. The place that's supposed to be the nerve centre of British government has become a viper's nest of accusation and counter-accusation. Deputy Prime Minister Angela Rayner stormed out of an emergency cabinet meeting at 11 p.m. last night after what 4 separate sources describe as an apocalyptic shouting match with Starmer. She was allegedly heard screaming, "You arrogant fool, you've destroyed us," before slamming the door so hard that security thought something had exploded. She hasn't been seen since. Her office claims she's dealing with constituency matters. Nobody believes it. Chancellor Rachel Reeves held a mysterious breakfast meeting with 6 senior MPs this morning at a private club in Mayfair. The topic, according to someone at an adjacent table, was leadership succession. Reeves reportedly told the group, "We have 72 hours to either control him or remove him." WhatsApp groups with names like Save Labour and Post-Starmer Planning are working overtime. Screenshots leaked to political journalists show MPs openly discussing how to force a confidence vote. One message from a senior backbencher reads, "He's finished. The question is how much damage he does before we push him out the door. The knives aren't just out. They're being sharpened in plain sight." Defence Secretary John Healey was spotted leaving Downing Street at 2 a.m. this morning, visibly shaken and refusing to answer questions from the handful of journalists still camped outside. Sources close to Healey say he threatened to resign unless Starmer reverses course immediately. Foreign Secretary David Lammy, who has been mysteriously absent from public view for 3 days, is reportedly in crisis meetings with senior diplomats trying to contain the international fallout. His staff describes him as apoplectic, that Starmer's domestic political games are destroying Britain's diplomatic relationships. Even Transport Secretary Louise High, normally one of Starmer's most loyal defenders, was overheard telling another MP at a Westminster coffee shop, "I didn't sign up for this. I joined Labour to help working people, not to destroy the Constitution. The cabinet isn't just divided, it's disintegrating in real time." But here's the layer that could bring down not just Starmer but the entire Labour government. Leaked documents obtained by The Telegraph show something far worse than anyone suspected. The proposed Democratic Modernisation Act wasn't just about stripping royal powers. Buried in Clause 47, subsection B, is language that would give Parliament the authority to review and potentially dissolve the House of Lords without referendum or public consultation. Clause 53 includes provisions to restructure traditional ceremonial roles in ways constitutional lawyers say could eliminate everything from state openings to royal weddings as official government functions. If these documents are authentic and multiple sources confirm they match internal Labour drafts, then Starmer wasn't planning reform. He was planning to systematically dismantle every pillar of British constitutional tradition, replacing it with a system that concentrates total power in the hands of whoever controls the Commons. Think about what that means. No checks, no balances, no traditional restraints on government overreach, just raw political power wielded by whoever wins elections. The optics of that would be absolutely devastating. It would make Starmer look like exactly what his critics have been saying, a radical ideologue willing to burn down centuries of British tradition to build something unrecognisable in its place. And there's more. Clause 61 of the leaked legislation includes provisions to modernise the coronation oath, removing the monarch's pledge to maintain the laws of God and the true profession of the gospel. Constitutional historians immediately recognise this as an attack on the religious foundations of British monarchy. Dr. Robert Fitzgerald of Edinburgh University, author of 3 books on constitutional law, called it perhaps the most radical assault on British tradition since the Civil War. The clause would effectively secularise the monarchy, stripping it of the spiritual authority that has legitimised it for over 1,000 years. Even secular Britons who don't particularly care about religion understand the symbolism. This isn't reform. It's erasure. It's taking an institution that has defined British identity for centuries and transforming it into something unrecognisable, something generic, something that could exist anywhere. The attack isn't just political. It's cultural, historical, and existential. Meanwhile, Nigel Farage is executing the political opportunity of his lifetime with surgical precision. While Starmer flails and Labour implodes, Farage stood before a crowd of 12,000 inches Birmingham last night and delivered what political analysts are calling the most important speech of his career. "They call us extremists for loving our king," he said, his voice ringing across the packed arena. "They call us backwards for honouring our traditions. But when did patriotism become extreme? When did respecting your heritage become backward?" The crowd erupted. The applause lasted 4 full minutes. But Farage wasn't finished. King Charles didn't break protocol. He did his duty. He defended the constitution that Labour is trying to destroy. And Reform UK will stand with him every step of the way. The polls tell an extraordinary story. Conservative support has risen to 34% as Tory voters rally around traditional values. Labour has collapsed to an unthinkable 23%, down 19 points in just 9 days. Reform UK has surged to 26%, within striking distance of becoming Britain's largest party for the first time ever. For context, that would make Nigel Farage not a protest figure, but a legitimate contender for Prime Minister. Political bookmakers have slashed his odds from 50 to 1 to 7 to 2 inches less than a week. The unthinkable is becoming inevitable. Reform UK's fundraising numbers tell the real story. The party raised £4.3 million in online donations in just 72 hours, shattering all previous records for a British political party. Small donors giving £20, £50, £100 at a time. Working-class Britons who've never donated to a political cause in their lives are opening their wallets because they see Reform UK as the last line of defence for British identity. Membership applications have overwhelmed the party's website, crashing servers 3 times in 2 days. Local Reform UK chapters report tripling and quadrupling in size almost overnight. In Labour strongholds like Hartlepool, Sunderland and Stoke-on-Trent, Reform UK is opening new offices to handle the surge of defecting Labour voters. Campaign organisers describe it as a political realignment happening at lightning speed. One senior Reform strategist told The Spectator, "We're not building a protest movement anymore. We're building a government in waiting. The next 48 hours will determine Britain's constitutional future for generations." Tomorrow morning, King Charles is scheduled to deliver an address from Buckingham Palace. Palace sources confirm it will not be his usual annual message. It will be a direct statement on the current crisis. Constitutional scholars are nervously analysing what powers Charles might invoke. Could he refuse royal assent to Labour legislation? Could he exercise the reserve powers that technically still exist but haven't been used in modern times? Some whisper he. Might even consider the nuclear option, dissolving Parliament entirely and calling for emergency elections. That would shatter every norm of British politics, but these are not normal times. Inside Labour headquarters, shadow ministers are gaming out three scenarios, all of them catastrophic. Scenario 1, Starmer survives but loses the next election in a landslide. Scenario 2, Starmer is removed in a confidence vote, but the damage to Labour's brand is irreversible. Scenario 3, Starmer refuses to go, the party splits, and Labour faces electoral extinction. Senior strategist Marcus Hendricks, a 30-year Labour veteran, was heard telling colleagues at a Westminster bar last night, "I've seen bad, I've seen terrible. But I've never seen a political suicide executed with this much efficiency. Legal experts are already preparing for what comes next." QC Helena Morrison, one of Britain's leading constitutional lawyers, filed an emergency brief with the High Court this morning, arguing that any attempt to strip royal powers without explicit public consent via referendum would violate fundamental constitutional principles. The brief cites the 1689 Bill of Rights, the Act of Settlement 1701, and the Coronation Oath Act 1688 as establishing a constitutional framework that cannot be altered by simple parliamentary majority. If the courts accept this argument, it would mean Starmer's entire legislative agenda is dead on arrival. But even if the courts reject it, the legal challenge buys time for opposition to mobilise, for public opinion to solidify, and for Starmer's support to continue collapsing. The Prime Minister is being attacked on every front simultaneously, political, popular, legal and constitutional, and he has no clear path forward on any of them. So here's the question that will define British politics for the next decade. Did Keir Starmer just commit the greatest act of political self-destruction in modern history? Did King Charles just prove that constitutional monarchy still has teeth when pushed too far? And is Nigel Farage actually about to become Prime Minister of Great Britain? What do you think happens next? Does Starmer resign before he's forced out, or does he fight to the bitter end? Does the King use powers nobody thought still existed? Does Reform UK actually win the next election? And what happens to Britain if this constitutional crisis isn't resolved peacefully? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one. And if this story shocked you as much as it shocked us, share it with everyone who needs to know what's really happening in Westminster right now. The mainstream media won't tell you the full truth, but we will, because what happens in the next 48 hours could change Britain forever. The Crown, Parliament, and the very soul of British democracy are on the line, and nobody knows how this ends. Subscribe now, because tomorrow's developments are going to be even more explosive than today's.